This is part 3 of chapter 10. We're talking about family relationships. Now, your textbook defines family really throughout this section, but they acknowledge here that families look different depending on what you're looking at, who you're interacting with, those kinds of things. They also wanted to define at the very beginning what's called a primary relationship. The primary relationship to be considered would be in a traditional family, you would have husband and wife. In more modern adaptations, you might have either a same sex couple or those in a committed relationship who never marry, domestic partnerships. But those are the primary relationship. So the ones who are at the top of that chain within the family. Now within the family, we have different characteristics. You have defined roles. These clearly defined roles will look different depending on what culture you're in, as we'll probably talk about again later, but this may be who's the major wage earner, who cooks, who cleans, who raises the kids. These are understood within that relationship. Then you have the recognition of responsibilities. Who's in charge of finances? Who is the more talented one communicating emotions? But we always have a responsibility to one another regardless. But, there's going to be a focus a lot of times on who's better at it. And then there's a unified temporal commitment within the family relationship. So we spend an agreed amount of time together. And there's shared history, future interaction. So there's significant past interactions in a family unit, and there's the hope for potential future interactions as well. And then there's the idea of shared living spaces. And this is determined within the relationship of what's normal and ideal for that relationship. Most primary relationships consist of people living together, although there's at least a small percentage of long-distance committed relationships. There are different types of couples within those primary relationships. Traditional couples believe in a mutual sharing of responsibilities, of life in general, and they do very little separate and apart from each other. Independent couples spend more time or spend time together, but they don't make a big deal about it. And they're also very independently minded, so they don't mind going off on their own. In fact, they prefer it if they have the freedom to do so. They don't like being tied down to what the other member of the couple is doing. And then separate couples live together most often, but view the relationship as a matter of convenience rather than of mutual love or closeness. So there's no ritual. Time is spent together, but only at specific times. The relationship is really just focused on the benefits received by being in a relationship as opposed to the emotional benefit or anything like that. It's more on the status, the convenience from double incomes, stuff along those lines. But they live largely separate lives. There are different family types as well. The words up at the top of this about conformity and conversation orientation. Conformity orientation is the degree to which family members express similar or dissimilar attitudes, values, and beliefs. So how similar they are based on their ethical perspective, their perspective on life, or how different they are. Conversation orientation, the degree to which family members can speak their minds, whether that's in agreement or disagreement. So, based on those two factors, conformity and conversation orientation, we have these other four terms. Consensual families have a high level of conformity and a high level of conversation. So everyone within that family unit, so we are going here beyond just the primary relationship to the extended family or nuclear family. They have high agreement typically on beliefs, values, norms, and behaviors. And they will express their thoughts. Protective families have a lot of similarities. They're high conformity, but they are low in conversation orientation. So whenever they do have disagreements or even agreements, they don't talk about those things as much. Pluralistic families, are low in conformity but high in conversation. And then laissez-faire families are low in conformity and low in conversation. These are all explained in more detail within the text. And of course, I recommend that you go and you look through that within the text. There you're going to be looking on pages 284 into 285. And then within our family units, within the primary relationship, we have communication patterns that will differ. Mainly within the primary relationship, you're going to see equality based on equity theory that both partners within the couple get equal benefits, they share equal responsibilities. One person is in charge of most things, no one person is in charge of most things. They're equal. They're split 50-50. Then you have what's called a balanced split, where decisions are made by individuals within the couple based on expertise and experience. So instead of everything being considered together, the couple will split things up into what they're more familiar with. So it may be that one member of the relationship focuses on making the business decisions, when to buy a car, how much to spend, how to budget, while the other one makes the decisions on child rearing, school programs, things along those lines. So the relationship is still rather balanced as far as how much responsibility is divided up, but it's divided by expertise instead of equality, where everything's 50-50. Then you have the unbalanced split. Unbalanced split is where it's similar to the balanced split in that the focus is on expertise and decision making, but in the unbalanced split, one person assumes more responsibility than the other whenever it comes to decision making. And then Monopoly, this is not like the board game, but Monopoly here is about one person being in charge of the whole thing. They are the dominant partner, and they make all the decisions. Usually there's very little disagreement in this type of relationship because the submissive partner understands their role. So there's no judgment here, and the textbook emphasizes this as well. There's no judgment on which ones are better or worse. This is just an explanation of different roles that people experience in regards to communication within the relationship. The last slide of this presentation, once again, talks about culture and gender and how it impacts our family relationships. In the United States, we don't really consider arranged marriages. We assume that people who end up married or in committed relationships had a choice. However, that's not the case in all cultures. Also, the rules for breaking up, or more expressly, the rules for divorce vary from place to place. When it comes to gender, uh, especially in relation to culture, these rules about building or dissolving relationships, culture is really going to play a role. And then, of course, across the world, to different degrees, same sex couples are accepted or they're not accepted. In some places, they're recognized as equal to heterosexual couples. In other places, same sex relationships are seen as taboo or even illegal in some cases. And so these things are going to vary widely depending on where someone lives, where they travel.